I was just like a freaking roller coaster of emotions making that film. I mean, there was days when I was like, I don't know if I can even start editing, and I was just all over the place for my own personal life and the struggle of making this big giant piece of work. And every time I got their footage on the screen, they would lift me up. And that was really important. And I realized that you can kind of get addicted to negative thinking. And I saw it in other people. I saw like folks getting addicted to negative thinking who were worried about climate change, but they were almost kind of stuck in the worry. And then I realized for me that as long as I was in action, I could feel better.
That was Peter Byck, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey.
From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day, welcome to The Regenerative Journey and welcome back to this week's episode with Peter Byck. Now, Peter is an amazing fella, actually. He has a history of making documentaries with environmental sort of angles, and his latest creation is a 4-part series called Roots So Deep. I had the pleasure of interviewing Peter a couple of weeks ago now. He's, if my memory serves me correctly, he is in the middle of, or just the beginning of, a tour showcasing the documentary. What I loved about Peter and his attitude to making this documentary was not just his motivation and his inspiration to do it, and the curiosity he incited for as a viewer, but also more importantly for the farmers he interviewed. He's created a documentary that is comparing, and I hesitate to use that word a little bit, comparing and contrasting the differences on a number of different levels of conventional versus, or beside, I won't say versus, beside regenerative type agriculture. Now he had five sets of farmers, 5 pairs of farmers. Essentially they were generally neighbours, one being regenerative and the neighbour being more conventional. But it was such a lovely way to do it. It wasn't confrontational. I mean, there were some interesting moments in the documentary, but the way he did that with such compassion and, as I said, incited curiosity in both of the sides, I guess, or the practices that he explored, was so respectfully done. And it was just wonderful to speak to Peter. We had a really good chat. It was a virtual one. He was in Phoenix. No, it was a couple of weeks ago now. You know, he was in the States, where I'll be very shortly in a few weeks' time. So look forward to listening to that in a minute. Before that, I just want to announce, without all of hoo-ha and the fanfare and the detail, we are creating a new subscription offering. I will tell you the details in the next sort of couple of episodes. One thing I will say, it's going to be pretty cheap. It's going to be very cheap. We're thinking $5 a month at this point. And also, anyone who was a previous subscriber or is currently a subscriber on our Patreon platform, we're going to move you across for 12 months for free. So that's all much as I'm going to say. We're still working out the detail. It is jam-packed full of value. I'd actually love to tell you what we're thinking and what we're planning, but I won't put the cart before the horse. so to speak. So let's leave it there. Just think and remember, and you might see in the next few weeks some different buttons on Apple Podcasts. We're looking at how to do it on Spotify as well. Nonetheless, let's move to the interview. This is Peter Byck, the researcher and director and the brainchild of Roots So Deep, the 4-part documentary. I think this is going to be a bit of a game changer, to be honest, because of the way he's put it together, the respect he's shown everyone involved, and his his ability just to. I mean, he's a great interviewer. He does a really good job. I hope I can emulate some of his skill in this interview with Peter Byck. We're going to listen to On the Regenerative Journey right now. Okay, Peter Byck, welcome to the Regenerative Journey, and welcome to my second virtual interview. I did one a couple of weeks ago with a fellow called Early Herter, who is German, and he is is he German? No, he's Swiss. And it was fantastic. We had some technical issues. We nearly had some technical issues this morning, but I finally worked it out. Peter, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie.
Where are you? You just mentioned you're in Phoenix, Arizona.
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Yep.
You're wearing a t-shirt.
I'm wearing swag.
You're wearing a bit of merch.
This is the first one, so we're testing stuff out. So this is a test. T-shirt.
You've got my vote. I reckon it's a ripper.
Thank you.
It's warm. You feel that you're wearing a t-shirt, and I'm wearing a jumper, not a singlet.
Yeah,
but I'm rugged up. It's -1 here at Burawa. Yeah. Peter, we have so much to talk about. I'm conscious of time, and we are going to get in. Oh, that's better. Emma just jumped off there. We have lots to talk about, especially Roots So Deep, a la your t-shirt right there.
Yep.
I want to get into that. But I want to go, before we do, I just want to go back to this, as I explained before we got on there. This is about your regenerative journey, how you got to be the man you are and where you got to sort of be essentially an agroecologist. Is that fair to say you're an agroecologist? Because
no,
or you're studying agroecology, or you're sort of.
Some of them are my friends. I'm a filmmaker and a wrangler of scientists.
Yeah,
but I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, well, you did say that. You said you're not a farmer, you're not a scientist, but you love both those fields of endeavour.
Yeah.
Tell me. So let's go back to day one. Where did Peter Byck sort of turn up on the planet? Where and under what circumstances?
Dr. Starr delivered me at Baptist Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky.
Good old Dr. Starr.
Who delivered my dad as well, so there was a little throughput there.
Wow.
But my parents both love nature, and so we got to spend a lot of time in nature, out on the weekends and things like that. And so I've always had that going. So that's kind of how it started, just good parenting. And my dad, we were on this trail. It was called Rocky Run. It was basically a creek bed in a place called Bernheim Forest, and I had a little sandwich bag. I think I was 3 or 4, maybe 5, and I put the little baggie when I was done with my sandwich under a rock. And we got to walking back, and my dad said, "Where's your baggie?" And I said, "I put it under a rock." And he said, "Go find it." And it's a creek bed, right? There's more rocks than humans on Earth, and I spent whatever felt like forever looking for that bag. And then my dad had a good sense of when I learned a lesson. He wasn't abusive. He got me, and he got that. So he came up to me and said, he goes, "You don't have to find it." And I was really committed. And he's like, "It's all right." And I never littered again on purpose.
Oh, the bag was the empty bag. It wasn't like you were putting your lunch away so you knew you'd come back. That's a
empty
great
bag.
Lesson. That's a great lesson.
Yeah. So that's it right there.
So that was it. So that was not necessarily a traumatic episode in your life, but it was certainly a memorable one. And so, what about schooling? Were the subjects that you chose kind of, nature focused in any way? Was it, I don't know, was your schooling somewhat normal? Did you have an idea in your childhood, like where you wanted to take your skills and your, what you want to do with your life?
I loved movies and I loved music. I would hitchhike to see a movie for the fourth time, if I couldn't get a ride. And then I was in this theater group, and I suck as acting, so I became like the tech guy, put on, turn the lights on and off and stuff like that. And the lady who ran that, a woman named Nancy Niles Sexton, was asked to be the dean of the theater school for the California Institute of the Arts, which Walt Disney started to have all the arts in one place. And she brought the catalog back. She didn't take the job, but in the catalog was this guy who, it was film school. It had a film school section. I didn't even know that existed. That was like, what? And so I called up the film school and said, how do I get in? They said, make a movie. And so I borrowed a friend's Super 8 camera and I made a film, put it to side 4 of Quadrophenia. So Pete Townsend helped me get into film school. I've never met him. Maybe he'll hear this. That'd be awesome if he could. Thank you, Pete. And and that I got in. And so it was that moment under that tree, hearing the phrase film school for the first time. It really was a moment for me.
Yeah.
And all of my films, a lot of them anyway, were all sort of nature based, like some sort of thing. The film I made to get into film school was kind of like Koyaanisqatsi by a high school filmmaker who'd never made a movie before.
So was that Garbage? Was that the one, or you made that when you were there?
I made that like to get into film school.
Yeah.
Garbage, we started 3 years after film school, and it took me 6 years to make. So that was the first feature documentary I'd made. And like I said, so Garbage, then Carbonation, so all my films have been about something environmental. They just have.
And tell me, was your family supportive of that? Were they going, "Oh no, Peter, you that's not your thing. You should be, I don't know, studying medicine"? Was there general, family support for your crazy idea?
When I went to film school, I didn't have any kind of concerns, weren't voiced. I think my mom was really happy to see the back of my car driving 3,000 miles west. And my dad was already living in New York, and he supported the arts as well. My mom supported the arts. She had an art gallery for a lot of my childhood. But when I got out of film school, my mom, I think, got really nervous that I didn't have a steady job. It made her uncomfortable. And I was making a living freelancing, production assistant, whatever it was, as I was working my way up. But that made her uncomfortable. When Garbage got accepted to its first film festival, that's when she, like, to see other people go, yeah, that's good. That's when she relaxed. And I haven't had, she's been a huge supporter from that moment. But before that, I think it scared her to have a kid without a steady job. I think that was uncomfortable for her. My dad, always supportive. Always, 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 always.
And what about siblings? Did you have any siblings that were kind of, along for the ride? Or
I'm the youngest of 3. My brother's the oldest. He's an orthopedic surgeon. My sister's in the middle, and she teaches. She teaches kids with autism or whatever's going on. She's helping the kids who need more help, and she's a hero. I spent 45 minutes in one of her classes once, and I needed to take a nap. She's just tremendous. And my brother, he sets bones and gets people back on their feet. So yeah, they're both very dynamic folks. Not in the arts. They never went towards the arts, but they're very. I think they're happy I did.
Yeah. Tell me, your sister, has she, given your current interest and your expertise and what you're focusing on, essentially farming's about growing food, right? And good quality, nutritiously dense food, which just so happens to improve the environment as well. Has she drawn any parallels with autism and food, like nutrition? I've got my view on that, but has she or you sort of, I don't know, danced around that sort of topic?
I've certainly heard the theories, and I think people are starting to prove that the human microbiome might be integrally involved in autism or autism levels and things like that. At ASU, they're doing studies on that. So I've read a little bit about that. The gut feeling, the things in your gut it just makes sense that it would drive your health. She and I have never talked about that though, I don't think she and I have talked about that. Now we should. Now we should. And my brother's an orthopedic surgeon, but he and I talk about, like, I'm trying to get him to do yoga, right? It's just like, it's going to make his body feel better as we age, right? He's in his 60s. I'm going to be 60 in June. I've been doing yoga since I was 25. I had a neighbor down the street. She just wanted to learn how to teach yoga. So she just asked anyone in the neighborhood. So I'd walk to a yoga class, spend 2 hours. She'd make us a nice cup of hot herbal tea afterwards, and I'd walk home. It was phenomenal. And I've been doing it ever since. And so I want to give that to my brother.
And he's an orthopedic surgeon. So that I imagine, it'd be interesting for him. Sorry, we're not getting to your thing in a hurry, I know, but I just love the background story on people. So wouldn't it be interesting for him to understand? I mean, maybe he does. He goes, oh, this person's, when he's operating or whatever, he goes, oh, this person's clearly does yoga because of, muscle and.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, like go, wow, and that become like a post-op kind of prescription,
Do the folks who do yoga regularly heal quicker? I would put $5 down to say yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but I would bet on it.
Yeah.
I've got a masseuse. He's a friend of mine. He's like a brother, but I met him in Los Angeles when I still lived there, like 22 years ago. And I don't see him very often, but I just went to him about a month ago. And, he knows my body as a masseuse for this long. And I'm sure he sees how people are healing quicker or not healing quicker and things like that. It just makes perfect sense to me.
There's definitely something in that. Well, you're a pretty fit looking rooster, so I'm not surprised. I hadn't said, oh, this guy definitely does yoga, but it does not surprise me. No, seriously, and clearly it gives you a lot of energy, because given the little I know about you and what I've seen. That has been a long journey. Carbonation. So that was a bit of that was a big thing for you. What was the sort of step between, garbage and, yes, it's environmental. It's kind of at the other end of the environmental spectrum, isn't it? It's like clean up the mess we've made. So what was the impetus? I mean, you were clearly aware of, climate change and concerned and looking for solutions. So what was the point when you went, right, I'm actually going to make a doco about this stuff?
Well, what's interesting is, I'm a kind of person that would make a movie called Garbage right there. There's the poster behind there. But I didn't know about climate change until I saw an Inconvenient Truths world premiere at Sundance. I didn't know. And I think I feel like I had like an epigenetic event happen as I watched it, because it just changed me. It really did change me. And I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. I kept writing all this stuff down. And what happened from that was, I wanted to make a film about solutions to climate change, because the film was so clearly well made about the problem. It was like a horror film, right? The poster was a horror film. The film was a horror film. And so I found some people to collaborate with to really explore, like, can we make a film about solutions to climate change? Are there solutions to climate change? And so that journey was intense, because once you learn about climate change and then you study it, you get something called climate change induced depression. There's another name for it now, but that's what they called it back then. And I was talking to somebody early on, and he said, have you felt it yet? CCID. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he spelled it out for me, or anyway, he told me what it meant. And but there was 3 people when I made that film. A guy named Van Jones, who's now on CNN over here, has got a beautiful career. A guy named Amory Lovins, who started the Rocky Mountain Institute, and a guy named Eric Garcia, who was working at a utility. And not Eric Garcia. I just got my buddy's name wrong. I just conflated him with another friend of mine. I'm forgetting the utility guy's name. Anyway, those 3 gentlemen had such a great sense of positivity. And I was just like a freaking roller coaster of emotions making that film. I mean, there was days when I was like, I don't know if I can even start editing. And I was just all over the place for my own personal life and the struggle of making this big, giant piece of work. And every time I got their footage on the screen, they would lift me up. They would lift me up. And that was really important. And I realized that you can kind of get addicted to negative thinking. And I saw it in other people. I saw like folks getting addicted to negative thinking who were worried about climate change, but they were almost kind of stuck in the worry. And then I realized for me that as long as I was in action, I could feel better. Doesn't mean I don't have low days and all that stuff, but as long as I was in action, and making that movie was action, going on tour with that movie was action, and then that leads directly to the film, the series that we're talking about today, because when I was making Carbonation, one of the first people I met was a guy named John Byck, and he's up in Marin County, and he and his wife, they had money, and they bought a ranch right next to George Lucas's ranch. So, beautiful part of the world. And the ranch, the previous ranch owner allowed grazing to happen on his property. He leased it out. And John and Peggy, who were environmentalists, they thought, well, the cows are killing everything, so let's get those cows off the land. So they cut the lease agreement when they bought the farm, and the cows went away, and John watched his land collapse. He watched his land completely collapse. And then that brought him into the, why did that happen? What were the animals doing that was positive? What were they doing that was destructive? And so his journey, I got to meet him after he had brought animals back and was grazing them in a regenerative manner, and was bringing back grasses that people hadn't seen in California in 50 years, but the seeds were in the bank. The seeds were in the latent seed bank, but they hadn't expressed themselves because they're kind of giving a finger to everybody who was treating them poorly. And so he was the first person to put the idea that cattle could be a solution, right? And then I met a guy named Peter Willis down in South Africa. He also was talking about this. And then I went to the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania. They were talking about if you used compost on top of no-till, you could really sequester a lot of carbon. And then Rattan Lal at Ohio State was talking about our pastures and our forests and our farmland could each sequester an enormous amount of carbon. And so I was starting to focus in on soils. After I finished the movie, I asked myself, what's the one solution? Carbonation had lots of solutions, from clean energy to energy efficiency to good land use to leadership and all sorts of solutions. But I was like, what one solution could I focus on that has the biggest impact? And it was soils. It was just clear. And then I focused in on that, and I met more folks who were grazing in a regenerative fashion. And you go to their land, and it's just alive. It's alive. And their neighbor's land is quiet. And their neighbor's soil is hard, and their soil is squishy. And their animals look awesome. And something's going on. So that's when I focused in on cattle grazing as a potential solution. That was around 2012, 2013. And it was right then that I was brought out to Arizona State University to teach documentary filmmaking. But they didn't bring me out to lead a science project or at all. But the school's kind of open-minded. The president of the school, Michael Crow, he's like, well, let's see where this goes. And this is about the only place I could have done. I think this is the only place in the United States I could have done this work. I could have gotten this off the ground.
Why is that? Why was that Arizona State University so open to it? Because given what I saw in episode 1 and sort of the lead up to that, and been through a university situation myself, and having particular views on sort of tertiary education, what made them so different? What made them go, give you a pretty bit of a loose rein to sort of explore the idea? Because that could have been potentially, I wouldn't say dangerous, well, maybe dangerous, but could have been a pretty short career there for you otherwise.
It could have been very short. I mean, if there's what's called ag universities in the United States, where the land grant system was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln, and that was to bring universities online to do scientific research about agriculture. And since Lincoln to now, a lot of that research has been sort of usurped by folks who are making a lot of money in the current state of the agricultural system, the chemical farming, the conventional farming folks. And so because ASU it's not an ag university, we didn't have that legacy funding. And I think that was the first step to giving me the freedom to be able to do that here. The other thing is Michael Crow, the president, just kind of dug what we were doing and didn't stop me. It wasn't like he was saying, do this. He just didn't stop me. And I was raising enough money for the research early on that I was sort of covering my costs and showing that there was support outside the system. And he let it happen. That's how I look at it. He allowed me to see what could happen. And we raised $10 million. I mean, it was great, from 10 different funders and lots of university partners, scientist partners. None of the other scientists at the ag universities asked for permission. They just did it. It's not like we had to get their university's president to say yes or anything like that.
That was another question I had, Peter, was, it was evident in the doco episode 1 that those scientists with all the ecologists and the bug people and the soil people and all those wonderful scientists that you pull together, the sense was they were all surprised that they kind of all found themselves together, but that their experiences had probably been prior to that, that their work and their interest hadn't been supported in their own individual silos of universities and research. Like what was
Absolutely.
it about? What was the magic in there that kind of? I'm sure at one point they all looked at each other and you looked at them and they went, "Oh my God, this is pretty cool." Like, what got them to that point? Was it raw courage? Was it like desperation? Was it? I don't know. What? Because that's a pretty magic recipe you created there.
To a person, every one of those scientists that had careers going when we all got together had put their careers on the line more times than once to want to study regenerative agriculture, which is a strange thing to say out loud, isn't it? And so that year that I was transitioning over to Arizona State University, and that year that I decided to focus on grazing, I had a number of conversations with scientists. I talk to a lot of people all the time. It's just part of my life. It's awesome, right? To learn and learn and learn. And I met a lot of scientists that were all really curious about this type of grazing. They were really, really curious. How did it affect the bugs? The bug scientists wondered. How did it affect the birds? The bird scientists wondered. How does it affect the microbes? The microbial scientists wondered. What about greenhouse gases? Well, we got to study them, right? So I learned all the pieces of the puzzle by meeting the people who were focused on those pieces. And so, we say this in episode 1 at that sort of intro part. When I heard about a grant that it was coupling natural human systems, that was the name of the strand of grants from the National Science Foundation. I emailed all these people that I'd talked to for 1 hour each over that last year. They didn't know me. It was just, hey, so-and-so said I should give you a call. Do you have a minute? And we talked for an hour, and then I'd say, hey, thanks for your time. And every single one of them that I emailed me back within 2 hours. From when I emailed them, drove home from school, came home, all the emails were back and very enthusiastic, like we say in the film. And I said to my wife, something just happened. Like something just happened. Something really cool just happened, because I can't believe a bunch of scientists just said yes to me and they don't know who the hell I am and I'm not a scientist. And so then we got a little bit of a grant from ASU to bring them all together early part of 2014. And this was the first time for a number of those scientists where they had been in a room around a table with no pushback. Like they got to hear yes and yes and yes and for 2 days. And I saw it happen. I saw their expressions. I saw it, and I thought, wow, this. I loved it just because I loved it, but they loved it for even deeper reasons. Like Richard Teague out of Texas A&M, he's the fellow from Zimbabwe in the movie. He's from Rhodesia, really, and then he studied in South Africa. Then he came to Texas. I mean, he's been swimming upstream for 4 decades, and when you see episode 4, and he sort of assesses his experience with this project, it's really cool, and he's grumpy, and he's a great guy. He's retired now, but boy, talk about arrows in the chest for being a pioneer, right? And there he was in a room full of people going, "That was a great paper you wrote. Let's do more."
He'd probably waited 40 years for that moment, yeah?
Yeah, he did not get a lot of support at his university. There's no question about that. But he had the president watching him, like me. He had the president's back. It's just he had a lot of faculty infighting, a lot of people who thought he was full of it. And, I just think that if you're studying nature and you want to see how nature can help farming, what's the problem? Like, where's the problem?
Well, then that's the question, isn't it? Like, what is the problem? What is the problem? What is the pushback? What are the forces that are prevailing to, create the hurdles and put up the roadblocks? I mean, we kind of know, but, do you want to have a crack at answering that one? Like your experience or those of others?
I'll just tell you what, so it was 2014, 2015. I think it was 2014. So I'm new at the university. I'm not an academic. I'm a filmmaker who got a gig at a university to teach filmmaking. But I was asked to be one of 4 faculty members to present to the USDA Department of Agriculture Secretary, Vilsack, who was secretary under Obama. Then he had 4 years off, and now he's secretary under Biden. And back then, it felt like he was in his second term of being secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that he was didn't have to really run for anything anymore. He had a whole political career as governor of Iowa and senator and all these things. And I think he was governor. I'm pretty sure he was governor, but I might be wrong there. Anyway, the 4 faculty members, I'm the 4th because I'm the junior. They all talked too long. So I literally had, I think I had 4 to 5 minutes to present this entire idea for this project. Right. And because I'm an editor, I could squeeze it in. Right. I got 4 minutes. Let's use them. And he really liked it. And I said the question you just asked. I said, there's just nobody studying this right now at the ag universities. And he said, do you know why? I said, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Tell me. He goes, because all the big companies and the big ag companies can't sell anything with what you're talking about. You're talking about using nature as opposed to using fertilizer. So there's no incentive for them to fund that research. And that's what he said to me. So I'm like, all right, there's the answer. And he would know better than I would.
And hence ASU was the place where they kind of, the walls are up and they didn't have to bend to the will of those others.
Yeah, because we weren't an ag university.
Tell me, let's get into AMP. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm coughing away there. Sure. I was actually interested you didn't call it AMP with an F, because I know like paddock is a word that we use in Australia, right? Like that's paddock, and I was interested to see that we used over there because you guys usually say field, right? That's kind of
we say field, paddock, pasture. Okay. They're all sort of interchangeable.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, so you don't need it.
But you guys call a ranch a station.
Yeah, big ones. Like the further west you go, from the coast on eastern Australia. There's a bit of a dare I say a boundary or a zone where the size kind of those farms that basically called stations. So let's talk about AMP because you talk about it in the doco, of course. I hadn't heard that expression before. There's actually quite a few different kind of variations on it. But can you tell the listeners and the viewers kind of what that stands for? And I guess let's have a deep dive into why it's so important. Without you letting the cat out of the bag about the results of your study, your research project, but like where.
Oh, I won't. I won't let that cat out. Hey,
Damn it.
you haven't seen all the episodes yet, which is fine.
Yeah.
You spent an hour watching our first episode, which I appreciate. Yeah. But that's in episode 4.
Yeah,
the results. That's years later when we go back and tell the farmers what we found. But adaptive multi-paddock grazing, AMP grazing. Now that's a evolution of concept that starts with rational grazing with Andre Voisin, holistic plan grazing with Alan Savory and all the folks that he worked with. Then some people called it mob grazing. Other people called it managed intensive grazing, strip grazing. So there's a lot of names, and I think they're all kind of a little bit unique in the way they do things. I don't think it's just a name change with nothing else changing. When our science team got together, we knew all those other names. We knew the methods. And what we thought was the word adaptive wasn't in it. And as a team, we thought we need to have that word in it because adaptive's key so that your choices of where to graze, when to graze are always adaptive. You never have the same size paddock in your field or the same paddocks, fixed fences. It's very adaptive. You're using a little strand of electric fence. You might make a paddock this size over here that year and this size over there that year because this year you had a lot of rain, so there's a lot of forage. Pack them in. That year, not a lot of rain. Got to have a bigger paddock, right? So it's all about having the animals in a herd in a tight space for a short period of time and then move on so that most of the farm gets to rest most of the time. That's what it's about. So the heavy hit, when the animals are together, they have to eat everything. And if they're not left in there forever, they'll only want to eat about half and then stomp the rest down. That's what they naturally will do if given the choice. They don't want to eat it all the way to the ground. They don't want to overgraze. It doesn't taste very good down there. It's more woody. All the flavors up top, right? And all the nutrients are up top too. So they want to eat about half, stomp the rest down, poo, pee, got it all there. Farmer, rancher opens up the gate and they just happily move on to the next place because they know it's better food. Like it's not a lot of work to get the cows to move to the next paddock. And then that piece of land gets to rest for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year, all depending on the time of the year, the amount of rainfall, the dryness of that area inherently, or the wetness of that area inherently. Very, very, very adaptive. And the farmers then will constantly be figuring out, okay, where do I want to move next? Okay, that field's looking pretty good. All right, I better hit that pretty quick because I got to get over there quickly. And it's the farmers who do it love that creativity. They love the difference, right? They don't want a cookie cutter life. And they get to spend all their time with the animals because they're moving them daily, sometimes every couple of hours. And they don't have to sit in a tractor growing hay and fertilizing, spending money, baling hay, hoping it doesn't rain for the 2 days after they cut the hay, hoping it does rain for the 2 days after they put the fertilizer down. You know, all these hopes. And these folks, the fertilizer's the animals. It's the poo and manure, the poo and the pee. And that's why we chose to use that word adaptive in there. Multi-paddock is kind of, I think, in a way, kind of too fancy. I wish we just stuck with adaptive grazing. That would have been, I think, just sort of simplicity of communication. AMP sounds good, but just thinking about it later, I think adaptive grazing is fine. So I usually say adaptive grazing.
I think it's great. I mean, I've always said, and through personal experience of adopting in my early days, or farming, conventional farming, one of the definitions of that, or one of the principles of that, is adopting a practice, that your agronomist has suggested or your dad has done for many decades, and you would just adopt that,
Yep.
And so in my view, one of the, I guess, defining principles of regenerative agriculture is the principles of adapting to your situation, because it's not going to be the same. The guy over the hill there, his practice of of grazing is not going to work exactly this. There's no prescription that you can apply to any farm when you're doing it regenerative. So I love that you've used adaptive in that as well. It's a really good description of what that essentially is. Let's get to animal behaviour, because it may have been in a number of the other episodes there, but certainly in the first episode, when one of the I can't remember her name, but she had an offsider there as well. She was, one of her roles was to assess, I guess, the behaviour of the well,
animal well-being.
Could you before we get to that, actually, just to set the scene for a bit, could you explain why and how you could use a comparison, which I have to say was such a lovely way to do it. I'll get to that, but if you can explain, just so the listeners and viewers can understand, essentially the structure somewhat of the doco, the episodes. There was a lovely thing to do.
Yeah, so from that first meeting with all the scientists, and our team evolved. Some people peeled away, more people showed up. So the team from that 2014 meeting to the 2018 field had some evolution. But the bottom line was we all came up, they taught me, I did not come up with any of it. But what metrics can we study to understand the system, right? And then what can we afford to study to understand the system? So the metrics we came up with, or they came up with, and I wrote it down, was soil carbon, soil nitrogen, water infiltration, plants, the nutrient density, the amount of ground cover, the amount of plants, the dry matter when they dry it out, microbial life, bugs, birds, greenhouse gas cycling, water infiltration, animal well-being, and farmer well-being. Those were the whole study pieces. That was 8 modules. And but then the film, the documentary, became a part of the study. It is a part of the study. We got our funding because we were making a documentary about it. I had no clue I was making a 4-part docuseries, but all the editors that worked with us, they just kept saying, you got more than a film here. And I was like, because that's just a lot more work to do 4 hours versus an hour. But you're an
editor, right? So you can handle
it's just math, right?
Yeah.
I am an editor, but not. If we can go right to the editing, so hundreds of hours of footage, shot for a couple of years straight, and 4 editors just dropped off. Too big a project, retired from film business, didn't quite get the project, and then the 4th editor that came on is a guy named Ben Daughtry. Ben got it. Ben took the time, studied the footage. I asked him to cut together a piece about one subject. I think it was about the birds. And I cried because I'd been through so many editors by that point, and a lot of money and time and stress, and he got it. And I cried for joy. And he gave me 1.5 years of his life, and he found the stories. And he was insanely critical to the shaping of the story. And then he was done. He was like, okay, I'm done after 1.5 years. And that was all COVID. Like he started in February of 2020, and like the lockdown happened when I was back in Kentucky, where he lives now and is from, where I'm from. We were back there just for spring break, and the lockdown happened that week. So that whole first 1.5 years of COVID with George Floyd and Trump and all the stuff. So that was all happening. And in Louisville, we also had another whole thing with Breonna Taylor being murdered, who was just in bed, asleep. And, all that stuff. So I think that added to the stress of his life, I think. I don't know for sure. Anyway, he leaves, and then it's up to me to finish, to do the polish on episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I had a bigger lift on episode 4. So yeah, I am an editor, and I could not have. I'm a good editor. I can just say that simply. That was my career for decades. I could not have done what he'd built. I could not have built it, and but I could polish what he built, right?
Yeah.
And so it turned out to be a good teamwork. It's just he did his work and we collaborated, and then he was gone, and then I finished it up.
And again, that's just the journey you've been on, right? I mean, that's people come and go, and that's life, and that's all part of the recipe that's clearly produced an amazing. You just put it in the oven and you bake that cake, and it came out.
Yeah, no,
Tell me,
but back to the
back to the sort of the structure
science.
of the science,
yeah. And you were going to Janice Swanson, who did the animal well-being piece, and she's had this long career. She's been a woman in a man's world for decades, holding her own. And when McDonald's wanted to see if they could do like pastured chickens at scale, they hired her to be part of that. And so she came out to study the animals, and she brought a guy named Dave Main out from Michigan State. That's where is working. Well, she's retired now, but that's where she was. And she just looked at the health of the animals, and it was great to watch. Like, how does she do that? Like, what are the qualities of the animal that she's looking at? And she could tell a lot about the grazing by the health of the animals. And so you haven't seen this episode yet, but in the third episode, there's a farmer from Tennessee, conventional farmer. His name's Johnny. And when we met Johnny, we met him at his office, at his work. And we went to the break room back there, and we're saying, hey, we'd like to do research on your land. It matches the soil type of Bill Keener's farm that he's leasing down the way. And they knew each other casually from being in a small town. And Johnny said to me, you make us look good, that's great. You make us look bad, I've got a shotgun. Not that all right? All right. That's clear, right? There's no ambiguity. No. But when we were filming, he did say yes. In 6 months we were filming, and he brought that up again. He goes, remember I told you that I had a shotgun? And I said on camera, it's in episode 3, I said, yeah, what was that about? I don't know. How would we make you look bad? Like, what was your concern? He said, oh, the PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And it's like, oh, animal welfare was your concern. He goes, yeah. I said, okay. Oh, yeah. I told him, I was like, that would never cross my mind that we would have that kind of negative impact on you. I'm sorry you had that concern, but I appreciate you still letting us do research. Geez, even with that concern. So then Janice comes out to check out his animals, and I'm kind of like, a little bit concerned. And yeah, exactly. And his animals, his family, the way they graze was phenomenal. The animals were in incredible shape. So it's like, whew. And what was interesting was, a lot of the conventional farmers that we had in our study were really good at what they did. They just, maybe there's ways to do it differently where it could be an even more profitable operation. And so you could see that Johnny's son, John, and his nephew, Curtis, were really the ones who were like, what? Tell me more about this, and that's what's ended up happening.
And that's a bit like, is it Wallace? Wallace, the son of the conventional.
Yep.
You could tell that was a beautiful piece there, because he was curious. Like, that was fascinating. And I was thinking that, I guess that's maybe what you've now come to realise, or you knew before. And it's certainly something that I have observed over many years, is that, like, curiosity is a superpower, and then it just breaks down the hurdles for acceptance and understanding, and kind of, that need to know. And so
exactly,
Wallace had it, didn't he? Wallace was like,
yeah,
it was almost like the other, the farmer, the name of the farmer, his neighbour, Cooper. He was almost like not sure how to whether he should keep telling him or sort of like hold a bit back or whatever. It was a really interesting dynamic. I'd love to know. Maybe that's another series, but I'd love to know. How, well, I guess if when I watch the next couple of episodes, it might reveal how that relationship actually grows. But
It just might. It just might.
Dangle that carrot.
But that curiosity piece, I have to do an amen to what you just said, because I just agree with you completely. I myself am curious, and I love meeting curious people. And when I saw that Wallace was curious and not judging, but he was curious what was happening across the fence, he saw that there was a lot of forage. He saw that the animals looked great. He just was too polite to ask. That's my interpretation of it. I think he was too polite to want to get in his neighbor's business. They'd known each other for 25 years, and they never had talked about grazing until we showed up. And I'm like, what? Can we have that happen with cameras rolling? And they're like, yeah. They were up for it. There was no like, I don't know. And his curiosity, and then we saw that down the road to other farms as well. And I realized, it's the curiosity is the opportunity for change. It's the opportunity to find common ground, to find where we can open up. It's already open. If you're curious, you're already open. It's just a question of what to put in there, how to talk about it, right? It was awesome. And I'll say this, I say this all the time, but I love these people. They're friends of mine. These are amazing. How lucky am I that I have 10 farm families I can now call up and go, how's it going?
Yeah.
How you doing?
That's awesome.
I
have a thing, Peter, when I'm sort of like, I guess, being curious about where people sit with farming and their source of food and so on. And I often ask groups of people, who's your doctor? Have you got a doctor, right? And they go, yeah, I've got a doctor. And I say, well,
right.
Are they important to your health and life? He goes, yeah, of course. You know them by name. Yeah, Dr. Smith or whatever it is. And then, so well, how often do you see that doctor? And they go, every 3 months. And I say, okay, cool. And so I say, well, who's your farmer? And then they go, what do you mean? He goes, well, who's your farmer? Like, you've got a doctor and he's important. Like, aren't farmers important? Like, how often do you need a farmer? It's like, 3 times a day. So you have 10 farmers, essentially,
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't live near them to eat their food.
But
right?
but they give you some nutrition though, don't they? They give you maybe not the stuff you put in your mouth. Friendship. Totally. That's nutritious stuff.
Oh, it is.
Tell me, were there times, I'm imagining that, your first 5, I guess the regenerative farmers, I imagine those 5 were pretty much straight up, yes, I'll do it. Your other conventional farmers, the 5, did you have any neighbours who went, they actually did pull out the shotgun?
Well,
without mentioning names.
All the adaptive farmers, the regenerative farmers, said yes before we asked. Yeah. They couldn't wait to get data. Yeah. And they're like, you're going to spend all that money on my land to get that much data? Yeah, let's check it out, right? The southern 3, so there's 5 farm pairs, and they go from Kentucky down to Mississippi. So Mississippi's the furthest south, Kentucky's the furthest north. The Mississippi and 2 Alabama ones were quite easy. They just trusted their neighbor. They were the ones that were right across the fence. And they said, hey, listen, if they said yes, we'll say yes. It's pretty simple, pretty lucky on our part. The Tennessee one was the shotgun. So that, but he still said yes, which even thinking about why he was worried about it, that's a legitimate concern. And I like him even more because he went through that concern and still said yes. He didn't have to say yes. He didn't have to say yes at all. Mm. And then in Kentucky, we were told, oh, go check out that farm. It's okay. I'll let them know you're coming. And they didn't. And so we got there in the morning, and the husband's like, who are you guys? We're climbing over a fence thinking they've called and it's cool. No. And it wasn't.
You're trespassing.
And we went through this whole thing. He was like, man, you're lucky our dogs weren't in the front yard, right? And then the afternoon, we think he's told his wife, because we need to go back and look at it, and he didn't tell his wife. So we go through the whole thing again. She gets mad at us. She says you're lucky the dogs aren't in the front yard. So that was a bit of a rough start. but she was curious. She was a psychiatrist, so she knows, she knows things about science and medicine. And she was like, what are you guys doing? And I said, well, we're gathering all this data. And she said, well, what are you going to do with the data? I said, it's your data. She goes, what if it shows that we can do something better? And that was the best question that could have been asked. Yeah. I like, in my mind, I kicked my heels, you know? It's like, yes. And again, being able to go through this whole process with these folks, and, doing science out in the real world is messy. And you'll see in the further episodes, man, the mistakes were made. and we talk about that in episode 1, 2, and 1 as well, where we talk about research plots and, getting out into a real farm and things like that. It's,
nature's not necessarily the best partner when you're trying to break it down into subsections and plots, literally plot sizes and silos. It's like it has a tendency to kind of want to bring it all in and interfere and do its thing, and it just wants to complicate. It wants to, move to complexity. Is its nature, isn't it? Which science by its very definition is like, no, hang on, we got to isolate this.
Well, science by its very definition, by who's asking and who's defining it, right? So I think I might get a little bit of this wrong, but in the 1700s and back, what we call science was called philosophy, natural philosophy. And then this guy, Alexander von Humboldt, I think I got his name right, from Germany, kind of realized in his world of, being a natural philosopher, looking at plants and different continents and things, he's like, oh, this is science. And he came up with the term science. But his idea of science was integrated, woven system, right? So the guy who invented the word science, if I have that right, he certainly invented the concept or put words to the concept. To him, it was a system. And he was one of the most famous people on earth. When Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States, second one, found out Humboldt was coming to the United States, he's like, you got to come to the White House. I got to talk to you. Like, he was that famous. And before he died, people started breaking it down into the granularity, into the, what's the word?
I guess into its parts, into its.
Yeah. It's not restrictive. It's there's a word, and everyone knows it in the science world. I can't remember it right now.
Yeah, reductive thinking.
Thank you. Reductive thinking. So the guy who came up with the concept of science saw it as a system. Before he died, that was dead.
That's pretty. I've got a similar story on a much smaller scale, but more recent. I did tertiary education, university, and the course I did 30 years before I started it, it's called Rural Science, okay? It's about the science of rural activity and practices and principles. The guy put it together. He had this amazing system. It was like I've actually seen the original mind map that he did, because I got to know his daughter well, and she's amazing, and she showed me this. And it was this amazing mind map of how nature interacts with agriculture and human activity, right? But in that 30 years for when he embedded that and created a course to when I did it, the same thing happened, right? Like, I was siloed. Like, we did different units of soil biology, soil physics, and chemistry. And in that time, not once when we talked about chemistry, physics, and biology, soil biology, did we ever have a conversation about how they all went together? So, Peter, I was at university, and we had actually, I'll start that bit again. You good?
Yep.
So in that course, we did soil science, and we did soil biology, soil physics, and soil chemistry, and not once did we actually integrate all those things into the same lecture, the same conversation. Organic farming was like one lecture in 40 units of university. It was It was
Wow.
madness. Tell me, I'm also conscious of the time, Peter. What time is it over there in Phoenix?
It's 4:21. It's time for a cup of tea.
That sounds good. I'm slowly defrosting now too, so which is lovely. I can actually feel my fingers now.
So is it tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon? Where is it?
It's Thursday 9:20 here at the moment. So
in the morning,
in
right?
the morning. That's right.
Got
It's a
it.
beautiful,
Yep.
beautiful autumn day. Peter, I had one question about animal behaviour. I'm just fascinated because to us it's a really important kind of a thing. The happiness of animals. I mean, our thing is the happier the animal, the better it'll taste. Was there any sort of, I don't know, results that you can leak that may sort of suggest, or support that theory?
Well, our study did not talk about the nutrient density of the meat. We just didn't have that capability to raise that much more money. That said, a good friend of ours, his name is Stefan van Vliet, who was trained under a guy named Fred Provenza, is leading the way on this work. And Stefan's studying the phytonutrient density of plants, then the phytonutrient density of the manure of the animal that's eaten those plants, then the phytonutrients within the meat of that animal, and then the phytonutrients within the human that ate that animal. And I think they're doing the human manure too.
Wow.
Might not be that one last step, but I think they are. And so that work is happening now. And it's really exciting because that's an important piece of the puzzle, right? To are the animals, are they tasting better because they're more nutritious? It does seem that flavor and nutrition go hand in hand, right? And then in our Northern Great Plains study, Stefan and I have talked about, can we do flash biopsies of the animals out in the field and just see if there's a nutrient difference, like a health difference of the meat, just from how they're grazing, like not even whether an animal goes to a feedlot or not, but just the forage. Because according to Fred Provenza's work, if an animal has a whole lot of different things to eat, they know how to balance their diet and they're going to be much more healthy.
Yeah.
And
it makes it
just like us, right?
It makes a lot of sense that with a broad range to choose from, and then being able to sort of self-medicate, which is just a whole fascinating thing in itself. That that the flavors, the flavonoids, all that yumminess that they're getting to choose, it just can't not add layers and layers of flavor. And a lot of that flavor is, I guess, stored in fat, and then it just makes so much sense because in that, in a pasture that is less biodiverse, then
I just talked to a rancher. His name is R.C. Carter. Carter Country Meats is his company in Wyoming, and he doesn't harvest an animal till they're at least 3 years old.
Wow!
And I've heard that in France, no chef would use an animal that's under 3 years old. Like the animal needs time to have a life.
Develop the flavors.
Develop the flavors, but actually have a life, and if properly grazed, actually do the work of the animal to make land better, right? Like it's not a speed test.
Yeah.
I mean, all farmers have to be patient, right? I mean, every decision has such a long-term payoff. That's something that I admire and I marvel at for a farmer. Like, a farmer gets their farm, either they bought it themselves, they have it, it's in the family. What do you get, 30, 35 seasons?
Don't remind me.
And that's it.
I think I'm kind of past halfway my farming life. I hate to. Oh no, I'm not one to ever retire. But you're right. Like literally, time. It's a really good point. Because the decisions we make have such long-term consequences. And 35 years, right? That's a long time. But really, in nature, that's a blip. And your ability to impact in some ways can be very, very can happen very, very quickly. But you stuff that up, or you not so much get it wrong, because I don't believe in things being right or wrong in a farming situation. But if you those consequences can last for years, can't they? This is one of the challenges of the unique natures of being a farmer, is we have to, there's so much out of our control that we have to live and just suck it up, a lot of the time.
Yeah, and if you're working with nature, nature's so unpredictable in so many ways, and the rainfall is so unpredictable. I mean, look what Australia's lived with over the last couple of years with the extremes, flooding, drought, right?
Totally.
And in all that flooding that you all had recently, you had flooding recently, didn't you?
Well, there's been flooding in various parts of Eastern Australia, at least on and off for the last 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Massive.
And were the folks who were focused on soil health, did their soils absorb the rain better? Did you see a difference?
It'd be safe to say yes, that they were able to. There wasn't the across the ground movement of water. It infiltrated much more effectively, but also. It was no doubt. I mean, I think it's one of the principles, isn't it? The water infiltration rate, which is what you guys did study as well. There's a system of rehydration of landscape that is being used in Australia. You may have heard of a guy called Peter Andrews. He's a look him up. I've interviewed him on this show a couple of years ago, and his son Stuart, and they've pioneered a farming practice, I guess you'd say, philosophy called natural sequence farming. It's about rehydrating the landscape through the use of contouring and mechanical work in riparian zones, creeks, and
did the Aboriginal folks in Australia do that kind of work?
Not to the extent, no. What they did experience was in the natural landscape before us whiteys sort of came along and created the most amazing drainage system on the planet, is what we did. What the Indigenous people here had was a landscape that had lots of natural wetlands which were joined on the same contours. So there was this natural system in place which kept the landscape hydrated. So it had the much better soil profile, a lot more humus and a mulch layer in place. But what was rehydrating that through any given season was this sort of complex system of wetlands and contours and steps. And so what Peter and Stuart are doing is recreating that mechanically, right? Because that's kind of what we've got. We haven't got time getting back to time. We just talked about that. Like, you could do it to some degree without mechanics, but it would literally take centuries. So they fast track that. It's fascinating stuff. I'm sure you if you looked it up, it's a whole nother realm. I don't know if they've been to the States and done that, but the principles apply. You've got gravity over there, you've got rain, you've got soil, and you've got all that. You've got it all. So the system applies. So back to your question.
And we have a big beaver repopulation. Starting.
Wow.
And the beaver are those same kind of engineers. Then they work quickly.
That's a great point, isn't it? Because they're like the natural, engineers, aren't they? They're
the water engineers. The bison are the land engineers. The prairie dogs were the tunnelers.
Yep.
And the beaver, and we killed them all, right?
Yeah.
Hello.
They're your archetype animals over there, aren't they? Broadly speaking, we talk about the bee is the archetype of the air, the cow on the land, and the worm in the soil. But these sort of, what are they called?
Apex.
Apex, that's the word. Thank you. Apex species, which are they're the canaries in the coal mine. It's fascinating.
That was me paying you back for reductionist, by the way. So we're helping each other out.
Okay, one all.
Even.
Before we get to the release of the documentary, the timing, the place, and how that, because I am super pumped to tell people about it, because I just think
Please.
it feels
Thank you.
like a bit of it'll be a bit of a watershed moment. You know, there are books, there are people, and there are books that have been, you know, the release of have been significant moments in the evolution of regenerative agriculture and, you know, human evolution. Because I mean, put your hand up if you eat food. Everyone does, right? We rely on it somehow. And so I got a bit of a feeling that this doco is going to be one of those, you know. But I've got one last question. It's about farmer well-being. Tell me again, without giving too much away, maybe, like, I've been part of a survey over here which revealed some really interesting stuff about farm well-being. Those, you know, conventional farming and comparing to regenerative and so on. Is there anything you can tell us about that before we go to?
Were you part of the study out of Oregon State?
No, we were part of a study here in Australia. I'm not sure if it had any collaborators over there, but no.
Because there's I forget the social scientist's name. She's out of Oregon State, and she did a big study in Australia on a social science study. So I just didn't know if you were part of that.
Maybe I was, because that's not something that happens very often over here, right? That's you know, so
it doesn't happen very often.
No,
it doesn't happen nearly enough. It's a lot cheaper to do social science research than it is to do all the biological research. Yeah. It just costs less. It's not like it's less science. It just costs less. So I've wanted to do a big social science, because you can just ask the farmers all the questions and get the data that you need to know. Yep, they're going to have more birds. Yep, they're going to have better water infiltration. Yep, their animals, you know, just by asking them certain questions. Are you selling your animals for more money? Are you spending less money on inputs? So the stuff that we found before we did the science, and when I was making all the short films for the Carbon Cowboy series, was the one thing that was consistent across the board. Everyone was paying 10% of their medicine bill once they moved to regenerative grazing from before. So moving to regenerative grazing, they got to lower their medical cost to 10% of what they paid before. Reason being, better animal health by the better forage they're getting. The animals are moving more frequently, so they're not just staying in the same area and getting any kind of cycling of pests and diseases. And the farmers are out there more often. They're with their animals, so they see problems quickly. When you open the gate, the animals walk to the next pasture because they're hungry and they know it's good. There's a couple stragglers. One's limping. Well, that animal needs help. And they see it that day. She wasn't limping yesterday. She's limping today. Got it. Go get her some help. And so that was just consistent. And just the operating costs, the operating expenses, conventional farmers, a lot of them use nitrogen fertilizer to grow hay. A lot of the adaptive farmers don't use nitrogen fertilizer at all, don't grow their own hay, and instead of feeding hay for 5 months out of the year, which a conventional operation, even in the Southeast U.S., does, their goal is to feed hay for maybe January, maybe December, January. Like, just squeeze that window down and down and down, and don't even bother growing it and all that work. Like one of our farmers says in the film, he's like, I think I should be growing hay like normal farmers, but I think I'd rather go swim in the river with my kids, with my grandkids. Yeah. And so those sorts of things, lower operating expenses, lower healthcare costs for the animals. I would imagine in calving that the folks who've shifted their calving to a warmer spring rather than winter, you're going to have less death. Yeah. That's got to be a financial situation. So those are the things that I can kind of give away right now until you've seen all 4 episodes that I find consistent even beyond our research, right? It's more efficient, it's cheaper, and it seems to be better work. It might not be less hours. It might be. I have some farmers that swear it's a hell of a lot less work. But even the ones who say it's the same amount of work, it's a more enjoyable work, or it's a more productive work, or it's work that they'd rather be doing. Like I've never met a farmer who likes to hay. I've never met a farmer that likes to grow it, plant it, fertilize it, cut it, bale it, store it, pull it back out, spread it, right? But I do know a lot of farmers that use hay as a tool in the winter. Like, that field is pretty spare, so let's put a lot of hay out there, keep the animals there for a bit of time in the winter, and in the spring it's just pumping. Oh, I wanted to bring up mistakes.
Yeah,
you
cool.
mentioned mistakes earlier, and I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. I went to film school, and the dean, Ed Emschwiller, the first day, like when he met with everybody, I'm a freshman, I'm 18, I'm green as green can be, some kid from Kentucky who's out in Los Angeles going to film school. And he said, make mistakes, make mistakes, make mistakes. They're the best teachers. So I had someone give me permission to fuck up.
Yeah, yep.
As much as I possibly, and I did it a little bit too much in too many ways, but I got to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I teach my students, it's like, I'm letting you make mistakes because that pain of looking at that poorly shot while you're editing your film the rest of the semester will teach you never to do that again. I can't teach you that. Clearly I can't, because you shot it that way and I told you not to. You know, it's like, it's only so much you can say.
It's only a mistake if you do it twice.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete Townsend. Again, Pete Townsend, he says that if he makes a mistake, he does it a second time so everyone thinks he meant it when he's playing.
That's cool. Get away with it.
And so Doug Peterson's a farmer in Missouri who we have a short film called I Sell Water and Sunshine, which is what he said. And we're like, that's a good title. And he was talking about this field that he just completely trashed. The animals were in there too long. It was too wet. It was too mucky. He was like, mistake, mistake, mistake. And then that spring, it just busted out. And he realized that wasn't a mistake. That's what I should be doing. And it totally changed the way he raised animals.
Extreme disturbance.
So I just wanted to share that when you said mistakes and that you don't believe in, there are no mistakes. I mean, there are a couple. I can think of a few.
I don't want to go into your personal life now, Peter.
Not that.
No, I totally agree. That it's the challenges that there's no growth stimulant like pain, and that's life, isn't it? And there's the other expression. Nothing grows on the tops of hills. It all grows in the valleys, in those low points. That's where the growth is, and the learnings and the nutrients are. Now let's get to. But after this, we are going to do a little Q&A session, just a quick one. I'm conscious of the time. You've got to get to your next cup of tea.
Yep.
But I want to hear all about where people can find it, when it's being released. I think it's not too far away. How they can they do? Because I know in some films get released over here. There's a way that people can do community screenings. I know this is actually a documentary series.
That's what's.
Yeah. Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So our website's rootssodeep.org. rootssodeep.org. Yeah. For Australia right now, it's still in the community screening, set up a screening situation. So if you go to our website and under info, it'll say set up a screening. You go in there, you type out a little form, and Bob's your uncle, and we're good to go. We've been doing that for a year over here, and now we're getting to where we're going to release it streaming on Tuesday, May 28th. It'll be in the US and Canada, release streaming on our website. So you're just going to go to our website, and at that point, it'll say watch all 4 episodes. You click a button, you pay $20, and you get all 4 episodes for a month, not just one time for 48 hours like all the other streaming services. You get to watch, you get the whole package for an entire month. You can watch as much as you want. We don't have a game plan for the release in Oz, if I may call it Oz.
Certainly, yeah. Whatever you want.
Or New Zealand, but I could see that could happen pretty quickly. And so maybe we could coordinate and do a little, maybe end of summer. It's pretty easy to do. We haven't focused on your beautiful part of the world yet.
Well,
And
I'm totally up for it. We can discuss that offline. My Michelle is a machine. She'll just chat with Emma and Sarah, over there, and you, and we'll do something, because I just know it's going to be received with open arms over here. Also, okay, so I reckon that's nearly. Well, what's next? Like, what, have you got? I mean, without giving it away, if you can't or don't want to, but is there, beyond the doco? I mean, it could be anything could happen, couldn't it? I mean, depending on the response, how it's received. What's
I mean,
next?
as far as best, I've been on the road for a year with this project to date, and I'll probably be on the road for another year. I will get down to New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, make sure
right?
You do.
It's got to happen. Maybe it'll happen over this next Christmas break. You're all summer, and I get a break from school.
Yeah,
I would love that.
Good time,
I would absolutely love
here.
it. And that's a good month I could be down there. I want to help get 10,000 farmers to change. Right. So now it's beyond documentary. It's change. It's real change, real scale. And so that's the next project is that. And let's get real change at scale and just get this knowledge to farmers. Let them make the decision of whether they want to try it or not. But man, I've watched it. When farmers find out about soil and soil temperature and exposed soil versus soil that's covered with plants and how hot that soil gets in the summertime. I have a farmer that told me he measured exposed soil on a ranch last summer in Texas, 172 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't even know what that would be Celsius, because what is it, like 125 degrees Fahrenheit is like 45 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
So
that's outrageous. That's like the hottest I think the hottest place on the planet is Marble Bar in Australia, or it might be in Africa, and it's like 57 or something. I don't know. But
right, which would be about
maybe your friend has just got the world record.
Well, that's soil.
Oh, so
it's not like that's the temperature of the soil that the sun is baking.
Wow.
So it's not the temperature of the air like in Death Valley or like you're talking about. I think Death Valley sometimes gets to be the hottest place, and that's about 132 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is 172.
Nothing's going to live in that soil. Is it 170?
Nothing.
Nothing's going to live there.
Nothing. Yeah. Unless you're at one of those vents at the bottom of the ocean, but you're not. No. You're in the middle of a field.
And then
so I'll be on the road with this one, and then we're just going to get to scale. Just help as many farmers find out about this, and then if they want to change, do everything we can to help them change. And then keep doing the science on all that change. Keep measuring, so we can get this cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Well, I mean, that's a great point to finish on. That is understandably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle for a lot of farmers is what's the science? I need objective data. I need numbers. It's all lovely to say that paddock looks green or those cows look happier, but to actually have the data behind the bird numbers, the soil, microbial content, all those things, it just legitimizes so many of the anecdotal, stories and observations that people are making. So it's going to, again, I think it's going to be a real game changer when it hits the ground, when it hits the Australian, the 10,000 farmers you're going to convert. You might find 10,000 over here.
That's what I'm saying.
We will do our best, Peter. I'm so grateful to have spoken with you and to have access to the doco series. It's been inspiring for me, and I've been at this for a pretty long time now. But to see again, to understand the data, that there's data coming, it's and it's really compelling. It's hard. It'll be hard for people to go, what, this is bullshit. When they're looking at the numbers, and the way you put that doco together, it's so personable. And I love, again, that it's not adversarial. When you're comparing a neighbour to neighbour, it's not about I'm better or you're worse. It's about, can we learn from each other? Let's get curious and let's make a big difference. So
let's get curious.
Totally. Let's get curious. Yeah. Peter, thank you so much. And
thank you, Charlie.
We will talk offline about how we can support you over here, and you better come and visit. We've got a Airbnb farmhouse kind of situation that we'd be happy to put you up in when you come over. So let's chat off the line.
Let's do it.
And
Love it.
Looking forward to seeing the rest of the doco.
Yeah, thanks. And let me know what you think when you see it.
Well, I will. You won't be able to stop me. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Charlie.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.